Hi there, my friend. Welcome back. Today, we are going to look at the last major subject of Abeka's 8th grade curriculum, and that's going to be the science curriculum. I have shared some videos on the language arts series, the arithmetic series, and the history one. So today, we are going to see what topics are going to be included in this science subject. So let's go ahead and get started. This is Abeka's science curriculum for 8th grade. And I am going to be going over the work text and share with you what are the topics that are going to be covered. And then I'll go over the activity book and the tests and quizzes that are included. Something that we have loved about Abeka is that it keeps pretty much the same format all throughout all of the grades that we've done so far. So we started at K4 with our daughter, and we started 4th grade with our son. Now our son is going into 8th grade and our daughter is going into 3rd grade. And seeing all the different grade levels, really, I can say it's really nice to just have the same format throughout when it comes to every subject and not having to become acquainted with a new format for every grade level. So for science in 8th grade is Earth and Space. And we're going to take a look inside the work text first. So 8th grade science is Earth and Space. Last year in 7th grade was Order and Design. So in the table of contents, these are the different topics that are going to be covered in every chapter. So chapter 1 will be Introduction to Science, using the scientific method, scientific reasoning, characteristics of soil, soil nutrients, and air and water and soil. So that's a total of 5 lessons in chapter 1. Then it has like a little activity that you can do, backyard scientist, and then the science investigation. This one has a few of them that they could do. So a stirring of the soil, cabbage chemistry, a little nitrogen goes a long way, decomposition down under, and drainage determination. So these are things that you can do at home. It just walks you through the different science experiments that you can do. Chapter 2 is Foundations of Geology. That's structure of the earth, earthquakes and earthquakes and then volcanoes. And then the science investigation is a homemade seismograph. Chapter 3 is Minerals and Rocks, Introduction to Minerals, valuable minerals, rocks, and substance of the earth. And identifying minerals is the science investigation. Chapter 4 is Weathering and Erosion. So that's types of weathering, water erosion, ice, wind, and wasting. And the science investigation is soda stones. Then chapter 5 is Interpreting the Fossil Record. So a matter of origins, collecting views of geological history, the record of rocks, a recent burial, evidence of flood, the lack of intermediate evidence against evolution, and the evolution of man, a mistaken belief. Chapter 6 is a survey of the seas. So water of the seas, movements of the seas, geography of the seas, and studies of the seas. Chapter 7 is the atmosphere. So we have introduction to the atmosphere, heat and the wave, patterns of circulation, and then once again, activities that you can do. Chapter 8 is water vapor and air masses. So understanding weather, clouds and fog, precipitation, and air masses. And there's a backyard scientist activity. Chapter 9 is storm and forecasting. So thunderstorm, lightning, and tornadoes, hurricanes, massive storms, measuring and forecasting the weather, and then the science investigation. Chapter 10 is consider the heavens. So introduction to the solar system, the inner planets, the outer planets, asteroids, comets, and meteoroids. Constellations, sun, stars, and galaxies, and activities. Chapter 11 is Man and the Universe. So instruments of astronomy, astronomy and time, history of space flight, orbits and satellites. And chapter 12 is environmental science. So the environment and pollution, global change, and managing our resources. So one of the biggest things for science for us was that it needed to have a biblical worldview. And throughout this entire curriculum, that is what it is, which we absolutely love. Then is how to use the text. And this is very colorful, very vivid photography that, it does give interest. So, key concepts. And over here is a reading with some pictures. Over here, applying the 6 steps. And then over here is tackle this. So if you were at a STEM fair, you know, experiment 1, experiment 2, experiment 3, and group 4, take a closer look. And then section 1.1 is a review. Either you got to define science. It's just, to make sure your child is understanding what they're reading. What is the study of soil? What is a scientific law? What does it mean to say that a hypothesis is falsifiable? So then again, 1.2, chapter 1, lesson 2. And over here is the review. And then we have the next lesson, Backyard Scientist. So here's like a little activity. So soil texture and composition depend on blah, blah, blah. Continue digging through the topsoil. So like different things that you could do. Like, this is like a little thing that you could do in your own backyard. And then the science investigation is a little science activity that you could do, a little experiment that you could do at home. All right, and those are peppered throughout the entire workbook, throughout the entire textbook. Okay, and then it goes like this, all the way through the back. This is my husband's favorite. And then it has like the chapter reviews if you really want to do the chapter reviews before the test. And then at the end, there's the glossary, just like all the other books typically have. There you go. See? Now, along with this is this activity and STEM project book. So the activity book is very familiar to the other grade levels as well. Different activities that they could do with the specific lessons that are in there. Okay. And then in the back is the STEM project. So it has the instructions, articles that they could read, and then their forms for the grade. So it gives an introduction to overbook, what a logbook is, the background paper, research plan, and then it gives like examples of what it should look like. So let's look over here. Okay, so sample research plan. And he even does it on line paper. Okay. And then the final report, complete the investigation. And then these are the articles, soil, water, and the causes of weathering. And then here's the STEM project background evaluation. So this is for the student, the content, mechanics, general things, statement of the problem, the hypothesis, and then here is the form for the grade. Do they have sufficient sources? The length, is the length accurate? Is the problem properly stated? Is there a hypothesis? The presentation of the topic, that's like the majority of the points right there. Mechanics, so that's punctuation, capitalization, grammar, spelling, all that fun jazz. And then here is the research plan evaluation. So it's a big project. It's like if you're going to be going into the science fair and you have to do all these components to it. That is what the STEM project is on. And this one, it seems to be on erosion and soil and all that fun jazz. So for the quizzes and tests for science, there are 2 separate books. So there is one for the quizzes, one for the test. When I organize this, and I typically share that on my channel, I like to take the quizzes and put in the tests in between so that it can all just be, in order on how they're going to come up. So for the quizzes, you're going to notice it is, again, familiar format. So quiz 1 is based on sections 1.1 and 1.2. There is a true false multiple question. They have to complete the blank. So the quizzes are pretty straightforward. Quiz 2, 1.2 to 1.3. Quiz 3 is only on 1.4. And quiz 4 is on 2.1. So you see, now we're here on chapter 2. So when we look at the tests, is usually test 1 is all on chapter 1. Okay, so what I would do is I would take this whole thing for chapter 1. I would rip it out. And yep, usually see there's an essay that they have to do here. Explain what would happen if nitrifying bacteria were removed from the nitrogen cycle. Include reasons for your conclusion. Okay, so they typically have to write an essay over here. And in the teacher answer key, usually gives you like what you should be looking for when it comes to grading this. So I would typically rip this out, and I like to use the binder method for organizing. I put that in here, okay, and pepper it through, and then hole punch it and stick it inside the binder. But that is what the 8th grade Abeka science curriculum is.